It's nearing crunch time for Labor's key climate change policy. Tensions are high, so are the stakes.
Because if the safeguard reforms do not pass, there will be no regime which encourages emissions reduction.
Government wants to keep opening new coal and gas mines, and we don't.
The mechanism as a whole has features that the industry needs to see retained.
Dotted across Perth's skyline are some of the big names set to be impacted. Around a third of Australia's big emitters are based in WA, where the mining industry looms large.
It's a real powerhouse, contributing $187 billion in gross value add.
And WA is also contributing more than its fair share of greenhouse gases.
Across Australia, the safeguard mechanism hasn't reduced emissions, and it's particularly acute within Western Australia.
According to the latest government data, WA and the NT are the only places where overall emissions have been going up. The safeguard mechanism, a policy introduced by the Coalition in 2016, applies to around 212 facilities across Australia, including 70 in WA. It was meant to keep a lid on emissions by setting baselines for each of the big polluters, but the settings were lenient. And in the big mining states, emissions from safeguard-affected facilities have been rising. The Albanese government plans to revamp the safeguard mechanism, setting tougher pollution caps for the country's biggest emitters, which will decline further each year in order to fulfil Labor's election promise of reducing emissions by 43% by 2030.
It will require 205 million tonnes of emissions to come out of the system by 2030.
Pollution from coal and gas goes up under this system.
The government has faced an uphill battle trying to keep both the Greens and industry happy.
Nobody should take this task for granted, and certainly not the impact on our industry.
Government is stumping up funds to help trade-exposed industries decarbonise.
We've been working with government to make sure that the whole package will not allow for leakage to occur, and by that I mean that we don't see our industries closing down.
When companies speak to investors, they often talk about how resilient they are to low carbon scenarios. When they speak to governments, you see a very different message. You hear talk about how industry may move offshore, how they won't invest, and jobs are at stake.
Industry groups say many of the big emitters will need to rely on carbon offsets that allow businesses to compensate their emissions by investing in things that help reduce greenhouse gases, like planting trees.
Offsets, particularly for a period between now and 2030, are going to be essential for our industries.
But the unlimited use of Australian carbon credit units, or ACCUs, is a major point of contention.
Paying someone to plant some trees so that you can keep burning coal and gas.
Facilities don't actually need to reduce emissions. They can still increase emissions just as long as they buy enough offsets. That puts us at odds as a country with pretty much the rest of the world.
Alex Hillman, a former Woodside strategist who now works at the Australasian Centre for Corporate Responsibility, says there should be limits on the amount of carbon offsets companies can purchase.
There's an important role for land-based carbon. We need our landscapes to be sequestering carbon, and we need a mechanism to deliver that. Coupling that to the industrial sector is not good policy.
Wouldn't limiting offsets force companies to do more now to actually reduce emissions at source?
Now, the problems with just imposing limits right now is that for many, they are still in the process of making the investment decisions, and so you're actually just going to force them into paying a penalty. Now, we don't know exactly the number of offsets and things that we will need, and that's why we say let's not have a limit now.
You can see here, this is how it starts. The trees are quite small still because this was only planted over the last 2 years.
Are these essentially baby carbon credits?
You could call them that.
The Yarra Yarra Biodiversity Corridor is a reforestation project in Western Australia's Midwest.
We develop projects like you're standing in, which provide carbon credits to the market. We're quite proud of it because of not only of its scale, but because of the high level of integrity that we have around the project.
Tree planting makes up a small part of Australia's carbon crediting scheme. It also includes a range of methods from avoided deforestation to methane capture. Serious questions about the scheme's integrity recently prompted a major review, which found it is mostly sound but has room for improvement.
There are some projects which could be considered lower integrity than where we pitch ours. And that needs to be improved. But we wouldn't want to see the whole industry painted with the same brush. As a part of reaching net zero, we can't do that just with offsets. Reduction has to be a significant part of the strategy. So that's why I say you need both.
As a vote on the complex climate policy nears, one thing almost all sides can agree on is the need for change.
A lot of the focus is on new entrants, but the actual reality is we've got 215 facilities happening right now and their emissions in net has been going up. And so we actually need them to be going down, and that's crucial in WA as it is in other places around the country.
Proposed changes are definitely a step forward, but they're also not sufficient to guarantee that Australian industry, let alone West Australian industry, actually reduces emissions.
This is a big choice for the Parliament. The Parliament can seize this opportunity or squander this opportunity.